In the previous episode,
I mean, there is nothing when it comes to health and well-being that is not impacted by food, I should say. It is just so vast. You know, one of the things that, going back to the previous question about food as medicine, I just want to touch on the fact that we receive a lot of enjoyment from the food that we eat. And we know that joy is a medicine. And so we really do want to participate in the full richness of the foods that we eat, the way that it tastes, the textures of the food, the smell and the aroma of the food, the socialization and the connection that we have with others when we're eating our food as well. All of that, despite whatever the nutritional value is, that's a medicine. And so let's not lose sight of that as well.
welcome to the Behavior Change Architect podcast, a conversation about innovative and evidence-based behavior change strategies designed to increase well-being. Tune in to listen to thought leaders, industry experts, and innovative scientists discuss hot-button topics surrounding specific behaviors, design, and communication strategies. Host Dr. Kerry E takes you on a journey to change the discussion, change perspectives, and ultimately help you change behavior for your clients, populations, and perhaps even yourself.
Welcome back to the Behavior Change Architect podcast and our series on food as medicine, sponsored by the Blue Zones Wellbeing Institute. During our first episode in the series, Dr. Dexter Shurney provided an overview of why food as medicine is such an important topic. And as a reminder, we aren't just talking about nutrition. Today, we are welcoming back Dr. Shurney as we continue the conversation with a focus on the state of the research and the topic of misinformation. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into the topic, and we're thrilled to have Dr. Shurney back. Thank you so much for being with us here again.
Thank you, Kerry. It's a pleasure to be back.
So just to start off the discussion, I've mentioned a couple of times that this series on food as medicine is being sponsored by the Blue Zones Wellbeing Institute, and I just was hoping you might be able to tell us a little bit about that, because many of my listeners may not be aware of the work that you guys are doing.
Happy to do that. The Blue Zone Wellbeing Institute is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. We're affiliated with Adventist Health, but we are a nonprofit arm of that organization. And really what we're tasked with doing is really finding out at a very practical level how to connect the dots for communities and individuals in terms of health and well-being. That's what we are tasked with doing. And if you think about the Blue Zones, for those of your listeners that may not know, the Blue Zones represent areas in the world. There were 5 original areas where they found people that were living oftentimes 100 years old. And for the most part, they were very healthy. They didn't have a lot of chronic conditions or diseases. They were active, they were healthy, they were riding bicycles and herding sheep in the mountains where they lived. And what the researcher did, this was Dan Buettner, he was working for the National Geographic and the Institutes of Aging. And what he found is that there were some common threads, common elements that he found in all of these communities. And what Blue Zones has done is try to replicate those common elements that lead to better and longer life in other communities. So if you live outside of a Blue Zone community, inherently outside of one of those communities, then what might you do in your community to actually live longer, better? And what the Institute is doing is also not only looking at that, but taking that to the next level of how do you bring health systems into the equation as well? How do you bring your doctor and some of the wellness programs that employers are trying to do and plus it up in some ways with the research and build upon the research that's been done over the last decade or more with the Blue Zones. So that's what we're doing. And food as medicine, health equity, a lot of the things that we're talking about here are part and parcel of our mission.
Yeah, and thank you for that. If people haven't gone out and read some of the books from the Blue Zones. They're fascinating. And if I'm remembering correctly, food as medicine is one of the topics that comes out when you're looking at these different areas where you have people living longer and better lives.
You're absolutely right. There are 4 core elements that we find. There's 9 altogether, but there are 4 core. And one of the 4 core is how we eat. And one of the things that you'll find in all of those blue zone regions of the world is that they tend to eat food that is not processed. So whole foods. The other thing that you'll tend to find is that they have a slant to the food that they eat. So they're not consuming large amounts of red meat and poultry. They're eating more plants, fruits and vegetables that we all recognize as being very healthy.
So that leads into one of the big things I wanted to talk a little bit about today. I mean, we're giving some recommendations and we're talking about blue zones and what they've found that people eat and the type of food that they're eating. It seems like every few months the news is covering a new diet, a new food, a new trend that's important to our health in terms of what we're putting into our bodies. How can the average consumer, what would you recommend for them to shift through all of that information?
What I would tell them, Kerry, is that there are a number of things that we have known for a long time about healthy nutrition. I think what happens is that people always want to hear something new. They want to feel as if, they're on the cutting edge of something. So that's one of the issues. The other issue is that people want to hear what we say is good news about their bad habits. So, oftentimes we're looking for, somebody that tells us that, we can go on a Twinkie diet and we love Twinkies. Well, then let's try that. That sounds pretty good to me. Or we can eat all the butter and fat that we want and still lose weight and still be healthy. Let's try that. But going back to my first point, we really do know what constitutes a good diet. We know that a diet that is high in vitamins and antioxidants and minerals, that represents a good diet. A diet that is low in cholesterol. We know a diet that is high in fiber, that's low in saturated fats. Those are good diets. And there's no dispute, no matter who you talk to, unless someone's just trying to write a book. But if you really talk to the experts in the field, we all know that these things are good. And going back to one of those common elements that we find in the blue zones, as I mentioned before, that most of these diets are a plant slant diet. And so if you think about where is the fiber found in your diet, it's found in fruits and vegetables and grains. There's no fiber in meat and dairy. Where are the antioxidants found? It's found in fruits and vegetables, also some dark chocolate and coffee, but it's not found in meat and dairy and those things. And so, where are the vitamins and the minerals found? And for the most part, it's also in fruits and vegetables. So we know from this that if we eat more of fruits and vegetables, we are going to be healthy. And so oftentimes we're done a disservice by people trying to deviate from that. And if you think about that, the human organism does not evolve that fast, that our diets should change that quickly over time. The diet that was healthy for us 50 years ago, for the most part, is healthy for us today. Well, I will say a little bit about how our food has changed, but for the most part, the diets are consistent.
So for those of us who are in, the lifestyle medicine area or healthcare in general, is that the advice you would give to them, that they can help their populations focus on the best research and advice, that it's the advice that's been around for a long time, it hasn't changed? If it's something new, it's probably not the best advice to be giving?
The only thing I would say is that what we're learning is we're learning more about the mechanisms of why those basic diets are so important. So, for example, the gut microbiome is something that has really been on the scientific radar for a short period of time, maybe within the last, decade or so. We've really come to discover and understand the gut microbiome. And what that has done is it tells us why these fruits and vegetables and whole grains are so healthy because now we understand how they interact with the gut microbiome. So those kinds of discoveries, I think, are beneficial because it allows us to understand the mechanisms of action of some of these things. But the basic science is the same. Eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and you'll be healthier.
So explain a little bit about the gut microbiome for those listeners who may not have heard that term before.
So the gut microbiome are bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live inside our GI tract. And what they do is they help us to utilize the nutrients that we're taking in within our diet. They also make nutrients for us as well. And there are really two types at a broad level. They're the good gut microbiome and the bad gut microbiome. And what we find is that the good guys help us to stay healthy. And they can affect things such as our immunity. They can affect whether or not we succumb to depression. They help our immune system not only in terms of colds and flus and things like that, but also with cancer and our immune system in much broader ways. And so they serve an important function. On the other hand, the bad gut microbiome actually can cause or generate disease. And so the diet that we eat, for a large part, determines the kind of gut microbiome we have. You know, another important aspect of it is it also helps us maintain a healthy weight. They've done experiments where they transplant the gut microbiome from one person to another. You could take the gut microbiome from a thin person and put it in an obese person, and that person starts to lose weight. And you take the gut microbiome from an obese person and put it in a thin person, and they start to gain weight. So it has some really broad impact on our health and even our ability to maintain a healthy weight. So those are the things that we're learning, and what we found again is that those healthy foods help us maintain the healthy gut microbiome.
So one of the things I love about what you were just saying is you started off talking more about mental health, depression, cancer, condition management and prevention, and then got to weight management. And I think a lot of people believe that the main reason to focus on food is weight management. And it sounds like that not only isn't the only reason, but it's not even necessarily the primary reason for most people.
It really isn't. So if you think about the gut microbiome, it's really that's really determining your ability to gain weight or to lose weight. The other thing too is that if you eat those foods that we mentioned, more plants and vegetables and whole grains, those foods tend to be low in calories, and they also tend to be high in fiber, which when you combine with an adequate intake of water creates bulk. And what that bulk does is it fills you up. And so what happens is that you actually get filled up. I like to say you fill up before you fill out, because you're consuming a lot of food, but the food doesn't have the same number of calories. An example of this would be a whole food versus a processed food. If you think about potato chips, and you think about how many calories are in potato chips, like you get the red cylinder of potato chips, that can be 900, 1,000 calories per cylinder. And you can eat those probably in a single setting, watching the Olympics or watching the Super Bowl. You could probably go through one of those things of potato chips. They're pretty light and they go down pretty easy. But you would have to eat about 6 or 7 potatoes, whole potatoes, baked potatoes, to get the same level of calories. You see where I'm going, right? So there's no way you're going to sit down watching the Olympics and eat six medium baked potatoes. There's just no way you're going to do that. So you might eat 2 if you're lucky, and you're going to fill up, and you've only gotten about a third of the calories that you would have from eating those potato chips, which you might eat something else with. So that's my point about going with whole foods. Yeah.
It's fascinating, and wow, six potatoes would be a little rough, I think. So this podcast is all about the science of behavior change. So where do you see the intersection of food as medicine and behavior change? How can, if people are working in these two fields, how can we work together to help our populations?
Well, it's an overused cliche, but you have to make the right choice the easy choice. And food is no different. In fact, food may be, even more in that line of thinking that if the food doesn't taste good, the food isn't accessible and easy and convenient, then it's going to really be hard to change those behaviors that we're trying to change. And so that's one of the reasons I like the work that we're doing in the Blue Zone Institute, is that how do we do that? How do we show people that healthy, wholesome food can actually taste good, that they like it, that they would stand in line at a restaurant for hours, to get a table because the food is just so awesome. But it's also healthy. That's really where we need to be, because then it becomes easy. Why wouldn't I eat this food if it tastes so good? It's healthy too, so that's a plus. But if we're just trying to get people to change behavior and eat, just carrot sticks and celery and some rice cakes, there's nothing wrong with that. But you see what I'm saying, right? People are not, they'll feel as if they're, being deprived of something, and that's not really helpful. And that's really the science behind the Blue Zones, because if you think about that, the people in those communities, they're not going to the gym, they're moving naturally, they're not trying to figure out what is food as medicine, they're actually just eating natural foods, and they're getting healthy and they're staying healthy. And that's what we need to be more of. And so what I would advise my colleagues in this behavior change environment that we're in is, how do we really try to change that environment and help people to do these things in a more natural way? I think that's the goal, Kerry.
And I know you're doing a lot of work in this area, but how can we go about that? Is this about the media? Is it about regulations? Is it programs? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but it's all the above. We all have to come together, and that's what I meant earlier on when I said connect the dots, because it's not a one solution. These are complex issues, and some of the work that we're doing in the Institute are really trying to connect those dots. We've brought together over 30 luminaries and advisors to guide our work, and these people come from not just healthcare, but they represent insurers, they represent health systems, they represent academicians that study behavior change, they represent food banks and community programs, and we even have an architect because we know that built environment can be so meaningful in terms of helping people make these kinds of changes. And so it's that kind of cross-fertilization of luminaries and friends of the Institute that we are working with that help us really create these good ideas. So we're not working in a vacuum. And then we pilot those. We beta test it and see if these ideas actually are worthwhile. And if they are, then we try to figure out ways to scale it. And to your point, oftentimes in order to scale it beyond a pilot or a study, we have to make changes to policies. Reimbursement policy, benefit policies, and things like that. So I'm pleased to say that we have a number of those individuals as well working with us that have an eye towards policy, and if they see that these things are really meaningful, then they can help us with that as well and open the right doors.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue, but I'm sure everyone listening in can hear the passion in your voice about all of this. And I'm curious, with that passion, if you had unlimited resources right now to do a study examining food as medicine, what question would you want to address? What's that burning topic in your head right now?
Well, the burning topic right now, I think, in the research that we want to do, I think that's really meaningful, would have to do with, a couple of things. One is COVID is on top of everyone's mind. And I would love to see more research done around, how does food play in the role of COVID? in terms of immunity, whether you get the infection or how severe you're impacted by it. And then the other areas in oncology and cancer. We know that a lot of these things are preventable. In fact, if you look at chronic diseases across the board, about 80% of them are preventable. And we know why that is. When it comes to things such as cancer and our immune system, we have less, understanding of these things. So if I could, wave a magic wand, I would suggest more research be done in terms of oncology and cancer, not only just prevention, but also treatment as well as survivability. Once people are treated with either radiation or chemotherapy or a combination, there's very little attention by oncologists to talk to them about, now, how do you avoid the next one, the next cancer? And what is your lifestyle? What are the foods that might be contributing to these things? For example, we know that a high fiber diet is very predictive of our risk for colon cancer. We've known that for a long time, and yet if you look at Americans across the board, we only eat about 13 grams of fiber a day. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and as you mentioned, I'm the immediate past president of that organization of physicians and healthcare providers. We recommend 40, at least 40, perhaps even 50 grams of fiber.
Wow.
And so if you really were to do those things, I can guarantee the rate of colon cancer would be much less than it is now. So that's the kind of research I would love to see going forward.
Yeah, it's such a complex field that intersects in so many different areas of study, but one that I think we're just only starting to really examine and be able to have an impact on our health by making some of these changes. So for audience members who are just, kind of really, you're piquing their interest, where can they go? Where would you send them to go get some good information to be able to look into this a little bit more, maybe in terms of the research or their own food and nutritional information? Do you have any good resources to point them to?
I sure do. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine is a great resource. They have a lot of the science in one particular area. I would also recommend, and they're a friend of the Institute as well, and over time, the Institute will also be a place that I would direct you to, because this is the kind of work that we will be doing. And I might just add that our work will not just be food as medicine, and certainly the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is not just about food either. It's really about lifestyle together. Now, food is a very important component of that. Oftentimes people consider it to be the central element of a healthy lifestyle, but I would just add that it's just one component. But again, our site and then American College of Lifestyle Medicine, there's also a physician that has devoted his life to the study of health and nutrition, and that's Dr. Mike Greger. Many of your viewers perhaps know of his work. He wrote a book a few years ago called How Not to Die, and it's really based on his work over the years. He reviews about 3,000 articles on health and nutrition on an annual basis. And the book he published a few years ago was based on about 5 or 6 years of that work. He also has a website, nutritionfacts.org. He's not for profit. He donates all of his proceeds to the science. And he also has a new book called How Not to Diet, which is very interesting as well. People would be surprised, how you can eat more and actually lose weight, how not to diet, but how to be, and obviously you become healthier too. So those are some of the resources that I would direct people to. Those are some easy resources and fun resources, and the science is credible. There's another place, the True Health Initiative, Dr. David Katz has organized that. Professors out of some of our major universities, Harvard and Stanford, Dr. Willett and others participate in that, and that's another reliable resource for people to go to.
So, and we'll try to include a lot of those resources in our social media and, of course, in our newsletter. So thank you so much, Dr. Shurney, for pulling together a lot of this research and some things that might be a little beyond what we've heard before and really helping us to kind of sift through a lot of that. And thank you to the Blue Zones Wellbeing Institute for sponsoring this series. Be sure to join us for the last episode in our series on food as medicine that will focus on how you, our listeners, can apply these learnings in your own programming, in your clinical work, and perhaps even in your own lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Behavior Change Architect podcast. To continue the conversation, visit our website at www.behaviorchangearchitectpodcast.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.